What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back in the video. It's Wednesday. Time to take a look at my favorite trade targets for week 4. It's actually a pretty decent week for trading, and I'm much more willing to trade now than I was over the last couple of weeks. I really don't recommend trading that much over the first 2 weeks of the season. It's just such a small sample size that we might think we know how things are kind of shaping out, but we know a lot less than people assume. After 3 games now, we still don't know a ton. There are going to be players that purely just break out from week like 8, 9, 10 on. We look back and we're saying, wow, I wish I drafted that player, but right now it might not seem like it. So 3 games in, still a very, very, very small sample. There will be players that are doing pretty much nothing right now that end up being league winners, but we can still have a good indication of some players to buy low on after only 3 weeks. We'll start off with running back because that's the position most people want upgrades for. And I would say the number one buy low is Bucky Irving. Touch counts of 18, 23, and 29 last week. And what's nice about Bucky is that last season he had 4 or more receptions, only 3 of 18 games. So he got a lot of work on the ground. He got some touchdowns. He would mix in enough in the receiving game to still be very viable. This season, at least 4 receptions in all 3 games. So he is one of the most featured running backs in the NFL, but only has 1 touchdown. He's been hyperly inefficient after being hyperly efficient as a rookie, and so he only ranks 16th in actual fantasy points, despite ranking 9th in expected fantasy points. The thing is, we know why he's been inefficient, right? It's not like we're trying to figure out, he's had great matchups, full health on the offense, he's great, why isn't he producing? We know that the offensive line has suffered multiple key injuries, that they're not healthy at wide receiver, and so teams can not only focus on stopping the run a little bit more, but when you have like 3 key injuries to your offensive line, of course you're not going to be as efficient. But the one huge injury should be fixed soon. Wirfs should be returning either this week or next week, so that will help. They'll get another offensive lineman back in about a month or so. Godwin set to return either this week or next week. Eventually they'll have Evans and McMillan back. So basically every couple of weeks, the situation's just going to get a little bit better. We might, again, if Wirfs and Godwin return this week, that would be a huge boost to the offense. But even if it's maybe like another week out from them returning, then a couple weeks you get another one back, then you get Evans back, then you get McMillan back. It's like every couple weeks, it's just going to get better and better for Bucky Irving. And we know this is a player that, like, once the team is healthy, and he's racking up, what feels like a floor of 20 touches every week, but 20 to 25 touches, he's going to be a locked and loaded running back 1 every week. And I know it seems a little bit early, but if you look at his end of season schedule from week 14 on, so the week before the fantasy playoffs and then through championship weekend, he's home versus the Saints. That's awesome. Home versus the Falcons, at the Panthers, and then at the Dolphins. That's at least 3 wins, probably 4 wins for the Bucs, and it's 4 games that the Bucs are probably going to score 27 or more points in all of them. So fantastic close to the season. That's the weeks that matter the most, and it's not even a player that right now you're like, oh, hopefully you can survive with Bucky Irving right now. He's still going to project as a running back 1 every week, even behind a bad offensive line without all the weapons on offense. So he's awesome. Running back 8 for me rest of season right now. The other running back I'd be going after if you can is Josh Jacobs. I honestly think that it's just a good strategy. It's maybe not going to happen every week, but whenever the Browns play someone, whoever plays the Browns, you probably can just have a mini buy low after that because they are just by far the best run defense in the NFL. So every single week, watch whoever plays the Browns have a poor game. We'll see if it happens this week. I'm actually really curious because they play the Lions this week, right? So the Lions are built on that run game. They have 2 fantastic running backs. Maybe that's the team that can finally break through this rushing defense for the Packers. But I mean, they've played really good rushing offenses and they've shut them down. Like they shut down Lamar, they shut down Derrick Henry, now they shut down Josh Jacobs. So brutal run defense, good opportunity to buy low after that. But also, if we look at Jacobs this year, the one concern that we had to start the year was 0 and 1 targets. So through 2 weeks, in games they won, he had 1 total target. And the question was basically, okay, if this continues and he's not using the receiving game, the floor isn't that great, right? Because we also had 2 positive game scripts. It's why we don't know early in the season how things are going to shake out sometimes with offenses. We hadn't seen a trailing script. And so it's like, okay, if he's also not in the receiving game of trailing script, that's very bad. He wasn't. So he goes out this last week. They somehow lose to the Cleveland Browns. He racks up 9 targets. So we now know in games that the Packers are going to lose, he is still going to have a role in the receiving game when they're winning, which they'll be winning most weeks. Maybe he doesn't have that role, but they're winning because they scored points. He's a featured weapon inside the 10-yard line, and they're having a positive game script. So even though he's not getting the targets, he's getting a ton of carries. We also know that he's been the 5th most featured running back in the NFL so far. Again, every time they get close, he gets the ball. And this is probably the last time he can buy low. Dallas has, I don't want to call it historically bad defense because we're through 3 weeks. Like some of it could be randomness, but they look historically bad. I mean, think about how bad at times Caleb Williams and the Bears have looked, and they just absolutely went off against them. It looked like it was super easy. Like, that is the matchup. Like if you are struggling on offense, you go to Dallas, you play them, my goodness. And it'll be even scarier, if they didn't have the Lamb injury, they can actually keep up. Now the worry, I guess, is if Dallas can't keep up with teams, they can score into the 30s, but maybe they don't have to be as aggressive. But that's a good thing for Josh Jacobs. Like Jacobs is going to be amazing. He's probably going to have like 120 yards and 2 touchdowns this weekend. And once that happens, you can obviously not buy low on Jacobs anymore. I think a wide receiver, number 1 trade target, you just kind of have to if you can afford it, is Rashee Rice. I would only do it if you're 3-0 or 2-1, or some of you have sent me teams where you're 1-2, but you're like, how am I 1-2? I'm like top 3 in points scored. I have this locked and loaded team that's not even built for the second half of the year, because a lot of teams that are like 0-3, 1-2 right now are built for the second half of the season. You've got younger players who are going to break out, when we get to weeks like 7, 8, 9, 10, and you're kind of just trying to survive until that point. If you're 1-2 and you don't have that team, you have more of the team that's like producing really well in points right now, and you're just kind of getting unlucky with matchup. Maybe you can risk it. And I am a person, as you can see with Rashee Rice being here and being someone that I told a ton of you to draft, I'm a person that likes to risk it. I would rather squeak into the playoffs with a super team than, be like 3-0 right now, but with like James Conner, Alvin Kamara, and like Derrick Henry as my like powerhouse for the team, right? These older players that always produce well to start the year, but that lose value as the season goes on. Not Derrick Henry, just kind of threw another old running back. But you get the point, right? If your whole team is 30 years old or older, you're going to start hot. And then you're going to lose value as the season goes on, and you're not going to be as valuable later. We want to have teams that are younger right now, that are suspended right now. And if we can survive until Rashee Rice comes back, I mean, you have a top 7, potentially top 5 or top 3 wide receiver rest of the season. So I can see risking it if you're 1-2 and you like your team. I would probably only doing it if you're 2-1 or 3-0, because in my opinion, I drafted him in 2 of my 3 redraft leagues. The goal is to go 3-3. Like if you can go 3-3 until Rashee Rice returns, that is amazing. You're going to get a top 7 wide receiver. I think can be a top 3 wide receiver rest of season. And so if you're like 3-0 right now, you have that locked up. If you're 2-1, you kind of have that locked up. And it really kind of also comes down to what the other team is looking like, right? If the team in your league is 0-3 with Rashee Rice, they are freaking out, right? They know the odds they can go 3-0 the next 3 weeks if you start 0-3 are, I don't want to say slim, but they're not great that anyone can go 3-0. So you're looking at a potential like 2-4, 1-5 start over the first 6 weeks of the season. That makes it a lot harder to make playoffs. 2-4, it's still absolutely viable. I won the championship one year when I started off. I think it was 1-6, so it is absolutely still okay. You have to like win out at that point, but it's still possible. But if the team is 1-2 or 0-3, they're freaking out. I would offer some sort of like combination. They're probably freaking out because they have a thin team, right? They haven't been able to use Rashee Rice. So if you can do some sort of 2-for-1, that's what I would do. I suppose a 1-for-1 is fine, but you're probably going to have to give up some sort of wide receiver too. And it just kind of depends if you're capable of doing that. So just see what they need, what they'd be willing to do. But I think you just kind of have to reach out to them. And again, I feel confident in this take because like right now, they give me Tyquan Thornton touches. They're trying to get by with Tyquan and Hollywood Brown. Neither of them are very good. I know Tyquan has looked okay at times, but they're forcing volume to these guys because they can't do anything else, right? Worthy is out, might return this week, but we all know Worthy's like one hit away from being done for the season. I thought Kelsey would have a larger role to start the year, but he's looked really old. It's very clear they can't rely on him. So they need Rashee Rice to come back. And when he does, he's going to have I would say he's going to average 90 plus receiving yards per game. He's going to be one of the most valuable players in all of fantasy. He's going to be a league winner in the second half of the season. So you just kind of have to. I mean, that you have to shoot for the upside. You have to be willing to give up some value right now because the potential payoff is just so amazing. I also think Tet McMillan is an elite target right now. Glaringly obvious when you watch him play that he's already a superstar. And the fact that, he started his career looking this good is pretty insane. He's currently 8th among wide receivers in targets. He's 13th in expected fantasy points, but he's on the Panthers, hasn't scored yet. And so he's 29th in fantasy points, especially early on. Touchdowns are really important, right? As we kind of go on through the season, it's going to be I don't want to say less so important for touchdowns, but you see the difference early on because kind of random players with mediocre roles have just scored a touchdown, right? There's a decent amount of players that aren't that good that have scored a touchdown. And so you see these players kind of jump into the top 20, top 30, and you're like, okay, that player is not going to finish the season top 30. And you get these players who have really locked in roles on their team, but haven't scored yet, kind of in this 29 to 40 range. And it's they're just not producing that many fantasy points, but it's randomness. Tet McMillan is going to score touchdowns this season. It is so obvious that every time they get close to the end zone, he is going to be the focal point of that passing attack. But the Panthers won 30-0 last week. And so, easily the best game script they'll have all season. They didn't need him in the second half. His last reception, Tet McMillan, and this is not going to happen very many times, came with 724, 722, something like that. About 7.5 minutes left in the second quarter. How crazy is that? He finished with 8 targets, but again, last reception was 7.5 minutes left in the second quarter. He ended with twice as many targets as the next targeted player on the team, but they won 30-0, so they did not have to throw the ball in the second half of the game. They're going to have to throw the ball in the second half of almost every other game this season. And over the next 3 weeks, they play at New England, home versus the Dolphins, and home versus the Dallas Cowboys. You almost cannot dream up a more perfect schedule for Tet McMillan. So I do think now is the last time we will be able to buy low because he's going to have, I don't know if it's this week, I don't know if it's next week, the week after, sometime in the next 3 weeks, he's going to have good games in all of them, but sometime in the next 3 weeks, he's going to have that true breakout where he has 8 receptions, 130 yards, and a touchdown. And after that happens, and people look at all these stat lines, they look at, because he's had highlight plays that have gone just out of bounds, or the ball is just thrown away, and he has these insane catches out of bounds. He's going to have one of those inbounds, deep downfield, or for a touchdown, and people are going to see that, see the stat lines, sees a rookie, and be like, oh my goodness, this kid is a true breakout. Just because he hasn't scored yet, hasn't hit inbounds, one of those plays, you can kind of get him. I don't want to say cheaply, but he's probably going to finish the season as either a high-end wide receiver 2 or a low-end wide receiver 1. So that's what it should cost to get him. And so if you can get him for any sort of wide receiver 2 value, I would do it. Another wide receiver that's a little bit cheaper I'd be looking at is Chris Olave. I don't know how. 3 wide receivers, only 3 wide receivers in the NFL right now have seen better volume, not more volume, better volume than Chris Olave, because you can argue he's seen the most volume of any wide receiver in the NFL. No wide receiver has more targets than Chris Olave. But you could argue, okay, a lot of those are mediocre targets, right? They're not high value targets. But accounting for that, accounting for the value of a target, only Devonta Adams, Malik Neighbors, and Puka Nacua have seen better volume than Chris Olave. Given what he has seen, we should expect a little bit over 19 fantasy points per game on average, but because he hasn't scored a touchdown yet, he's 32nd in actual fantasy points. Now again, expected fantasy points assumes an average player on an average team, and we know that the Saints are a below average team, but we also know Chris Olave is an above average player. So I don't think that, this difference of, basically 8 to 10, depends on scoring format, 8 to 10 more expected fantasy points than actual fantasy points. That gap is way too large. He is going to score a touchdown at some point. He is going to break off a big play. The problem is, even though he's been relatively efficient, 62% catch rate, again, 37 targets, 2 more than Puka as the most targeted player in the NFL, he just hasn't broke off anything. I think his longest reception is 14 yards on 37 targets. Eventually, someone is going to miss a tackle. Someone is going to blow a coverage. He's going to just make someone miss or find an opening to where he's going to have a longer reception. He's going to score a touchdown. And once that starts to happen and people start to realize he's on pace for 210 targets, I do not care how efficient you are on targets. If you have a 62% catch rate playing in a dome with 210 targets, you're going to be very valuable in all formats of fantasy, not even PPR, but in half PPR. Right now, I have him rest of season as a wide receiver 27. That is above market, and it still feels too low. If he goes out there next week and he's another like 10 to 12 target game, and he has a decent performance on that, he should be valued as a top 20 wide receiver. But right now, I don't really feel a need to move him a lot higher than this because the market is relatively low on Chris Olave because of the overall situation. But he has been phenomenal. He's a phenomenal flex play if you can play him in the flex. I think he gives you that upside to be kind of that mid-range wide receiver too, if any sort of efficiency increases, because this offense is going to play fast, throw the ball a lot, and be trailing. We know they're not going to win that many games, but they're going to continue playing really, really fast. And that's a great situation for wide receivers in fantasy. And it's very safe. You know that with his target share, with his usage on offense, he's not going to have games where he used to have in the past where he had like one catch on 4 targets. Those games don't really exist anymore. And so when you have that stable floor, it unlocks that ceiling if he scores and hits for big play. At tight end, I think you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't at least see what it takes to get Brock Bowers. The Bowers team very likely is not off to a very good start. He was a second-round pick, and where he went, I actually think there's a lot of teams that drafted CeeDee Lamb and then drafted Brock Bowers and then went running back after that. And the teams that did that are probably 0-3. Like, that is a great start, right? Like, I'm not saying it was a bad play in theory. But if you took CeeDee Lamb, if you took CeeDee Lamb and Bowers, you lost last week. I mean, Bowers didn't get that many points. CeeDee Lamb scored 0. Like, unless you really hit in the middle rounds, you probably lost last week. And given that you probably had to go running back in round 3, 4 after that, the running backs that were available at that point haven't exactly dropped nukes. So I'm thinking teams that started off that way are like 1-2 or 0-3. And if that's the case, I really feel like, especially if they drafted CeeDee Lamb, they will be willing to trade you Brock Bowers, because you're staring at 4 to 6 missed weeks for CeeDee Lamb, a still banged up Brock Bowers. You know, that's tough, right? And if you're 0-3, maybe you are willing to say, okay, trade me your tight end, and whoever your wide receiver 2 is, I need the points now. I need to try and win now. I'm okay losing Brock Bowers, who had a great, first 3.5 to 3 quarters. I think it was 2.5 to 3 quarters against the Patriots in week 1 before getting injured, and has been mediocre after that, but he hasn't scored a touchdown. He's been playing through injury, and so we haven't seen that ceiling. But we know Brock Bowers is a phenomenal talent. We know that he has the upside to go 100 and a touchdown every single week. And so even if it takes you I would say you're probably looking at like Sutton, Pickens, Ladd, Flowers, someone like that. Might have to go up to like an Egbuka or a Wilson. But if it's one of those wide receivers plus your tight end, who hopefully is like decent, like hopefully you don't have like Brenton Strange. I don't know if it can be Brenton Strange and one of those guys. Like, you're hoping you have kind of a back half tight end 1 that you can say, okay, here's still a good option at tight end plus a wide receiver 2 for Brock Bowers. I'm thinking that's probably more along the lines of what it'll take. But if you can do that and Bowers can get healthy over the next couple of weeks, you're unlocking such an immense ceiling, because I still think he's the tight end 1. I think it's very close between him and Trey McBride. But rest of the season right now, in the rest of the season rankings, I do have Brock Bowers number 1. And if you can hit on that at a buy low at any point of the season, I don't know. I feel like that's a great move to make. Don't really know that there's any other options. And the thing is, with tight end, there's always so few. Like, it seems like it's Bowers, it's Kittle when healthy, but you don't love trading for someone that's currently on IR for an injury, because we don't technically know, is he back in week 5, week 6? Is he 100% when he's back? Like, at least for Bowers, he's out there playing. Like, even though he's banged up, like, he's recovering every week, he's out there. You feel a lot better than that, than someone who's literally not playing at all. But it's like Bowers, it's Kittle, it's McBride, it's probably Tyler Warren, it's Ferguson. But how many other tight ends do you feel confident are going to go out there and get you more than like 30 receiving yards? Maybe Tucker Kraft when he's healthy, but like, there's not that many this season, and there's not that many any season. So whenever you have an opportunity to buy one of these guys that can have 100 and a score in a week that no other tight end gets more than 11 fantasy points, you just unlock such a big differentiator on your team. So again, great opportunity to buy low on Brock Bowers this week. So those are the players I'd be trading for this week. I've got a much larger list on my website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com, but you can always just make your own. You can use a trade calculator on the website, Google Sheet one, or the simple one, or the sleeper one. Also, just rest of season. You can just look at the rest of season rankings. I went through and I did a big update this season to get those more stable and more in line with how I'm thinking rest of season. So I really like the rest of season rankings right now. And they're updated multiple times per week. Anytime I see a big update that I want to make, I push it right through very quickly. So they're always up to date. So you can just look at that. Say, okay, I need an upgrade at wide receiver. Here are some wide receivers that Nick would be willing to trade for because they are in this high-end wide receiver that I'm looking for. I think it's just a really good tool to look at, value players rest of season, and understand who are the guys we like, who are the guys we don't like. So again, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. I will be back tomorrow to go over the week 4 rankings, and then Friday to go my favorite underdog plays this week. Please make sure you're subscribed on either YouTube or Spotify so you don't miss either of those. That, my friends, is the end of this one, and thank you all for watching.